This is the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast with Greg Smith and Jay Foreman.
Exclusively on the Hurrdat Media Network.
Tell it to me straight up.
Hello, and welcome into the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast, proudly part of the Hail Varsity Network. I am Greg Smith. Why did I schedule a dentist appointment later today, friend?
I am Jay Foreman. You're back off of the NBA COVID-19 list, off of injury reserve. I'm back in full effect.
Man, that NBA thing is funny because we're going to talk about the NBA today, but I'm glad you're feeling better. I've been talking to you the last couple of weeks. I'm glad you're pulling through over there.
Yeah, we're trying to. COVID has no boundaries, no barriers, man. My college nickname was Black Steel. I think COVID made me into black aluminum after it beat me up pretty bad. But, I was able to pull through, had good, doctors and stuff like that, good family. Wife took good care of me. Kids took good care of me. So, it's real out there. And, I'd like to say I did everything I could have precaution-wise, but sometimes it can just find its way into you. So it's real. Wear your mask, regardless whether you're right, left, middle. I don't even know who's who, anymore. So, anyways, just do what you got to do, and then hopefully, in a few months it'll be all gone.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, though. Is we talked some about COVID, and it's hard not to, given how present it is everywhere. But I think it's a good point that you make that, and I know that you've been doing what you need to do and taking care of things. So it's not. I think that when this first really became a big thing and people were getting it, people only think of the folks that are out there partying and acting a fool and how they gonna get it, but it's not always I would say some nefarious thing that somebody is doing that caused them to get it as well. Yeah,
it's I think I spent obviously I'm actually try to be as health conscious, or we all are actually. That's a great thing. So, I don't really get sick a lot, and when I do, it's not bad. And so really, even while being progressively, and it's a progressive, for me, it seemed like every hour I was hitting some checkpoints that were but even as that was going, I was I spent literally the first couple of days, or maybe the first 3 or 4 days, beating myself up, trying to figure out what did I do wrong? Right? Where did I kind of, and I'm, me and Joshua was talking before we came on, still don't know because it's an invisible, enemy that you're fighting. So, right. I spent the first 2 or 3 days beating myself up. How could I do this? Why? I was more disappointed, letting people down because, coach and mentor kids, you want to take care of your house and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's not a thing. It definitely wasn't your boy Bow Wow down in Houston getting called out by the Houston mayor having a party down there, and he got ran out of the city of Houston within 24 hours. It wasn't anything like that. We've always, if we have any gatherings, it's been very small, if any, and very obviously social distance. So it's just one of those things, and but I'm glad I'm towards the back end of it, but it's for the people out there listening, it's one of those things that's gonna touch everybody's homes. Hopefully, it doesn't touch you personally. It's no joke, and just at the end of the day, try to do what's best for you and your family, and then obviously you want to protect people out there that are not as in good as health, or could affect them even worse, if they got it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we are recording this on Monday, January 18th, the time is right now, 9:07 a.m. So that means it is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And it's not lost on us that we are two Black men hosting this podcast from a market that doesn't really have all that many people that look like us doing this, right? We talk about this between Jay and myself, more personally than we talk about it on the pod. I think that it's understood and you guys understand that. And so because of that, I think it would feel odd to me if I kind of let this moment pass without giving y'all some thoughts on what I think about this day. And I'll kind of let Jay say, what he wants to say as well, because we try to keep it real with y'all. And we want to do this show just like we're two friends at the barbershop, or you were invited to the cookout. We got the ribs going, right? But honestly, the way that I feel about this day is I'm always very conflicted, and that is not any different this year. It might even be more heightened this year. It has nothing to do with kind of Dr. King himself or his legacy, but more about what we've done to kind of uphold and protect it as a society. By the time you hear this podcast, whether you get it the first day is available on Tuesday or later in the week, you will have seen plenty of people, sports teams and brands share their favorite Martin Luther King Jr. quotes. But some of these people, teams, and brands were silent over the summer while we were marching for Black Lives to Matter. Others posted those performative black squares on Instagram and just kind of called it good. And that reminds me of kind of one of my favorite Martin Luther King Jr. quotes, which is, quote, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." And whether it was this summer or it was January 6th during the insurrection in Washington, D.C., there have been plenty of chances for people to show where they stand in times of controversy. So as we all kind of reflect on what this day means and what this great man's legacy means to us, I want people to just look around and kind of take inventory of where it is that you stand on these issues and who it's with, because that tells a lot about your character and where you stand in times of challenge and controversy.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have said it any better. And it's funny, I was talking to my daughters about it, and they go to well, I think Lincoln's become more diverse, but they go to obviously way more diverse school, and obviously being biracial, I think that you have to do a really, really good job, or we always try to do a really, really good job with all our kids of explaining when certain things happen, what it means to be African American, what it means to be biracial, that you're still both, but so majority of the time that's what they look at you as African American. It's not fair, but it's life. So yeah, it's every day should be a celebratory day, but this is the day that you kind of remember some of the great things that you try to remember, all the great things he's done, and the hopefully the effect that he continues to have on us. And if there's ever been a time to really sit back and reflect and see, hey, look, maybe we can, everybody, and I'm talking about all across the, whether you're white, black, and, whether Asian or, Latino descent or whatever, everybody needs to do self-inventory. Where do you stand on certain issues? Were you really, really open-minded? Because I think that sometimes people try to pigeonhole, and granted, it is, an African-American predominantly holiday, but I think if you really, really sit back and listen to what he was saying, he wanted equality for everybody, right? So this is in there, and it could come in all different facets of life where you can understand what he was doing. It's not just, okay, just a white, black issue. Yes, of course, back then, that's really all it was, because it was something that was really focused on. But as we're moving to, 2021 and hopefully, bigger and better times, you're just waiting for, more consistency and better times, better thought process. And that's across both boards. You know what I'm saying? The extremism on, I'd say the name calling and actions. Some of them are justified. Some of them aren't. What people have to understand, the perception that you put out there, and it is sometimes going to be your reality. So your lack of action gives people only one option to draw conclusions, right? And they always say, if it looks like a duck, acts like a duck, quacks like a duck, it probably is a duck, right? And it's hard. And I also try to, when I see, whether it's universities, coaches, sports figures, friends say stuff, or people say it in passing, I always try to, me personally, try to do a better job not to be reactionary right away. And yes, I take inventory, right? I have probably years of long inventory. They take inventory of me as well, right? I was never raised like that. I have, plenty of descendants across the board in my family, long down the family tree. So that was nixed from a very early age. But I always try to understand, like, okay, where are they from? Is it just lack of knowledge? lack of experience. You know what I'm saying? Or I wouldn't say that they're scared, but just a lack of understanding.
Awareness.
Yeah, lack of awareness or understanding. And then how can you approach it and say, oh, nah, man, you're a little off base. You need to tighten that up, dude. You know what I'm saying? Or sometimes you got people that try to like dummy it down and think it's funny, and sometimes you have to flex on them, like, you ain't funny. And I've had to tell some people, a joke is usually funny, and I'm usually pretty lax about any type of jokes, because I don't think anybody should not be able to be themselves and joke about stuff, right? Because look,
Right.
Comedians have made millions of dollars on joking about Black issues, white issues, just joking about ourselves, right? Saying stuff that you can't say on mainstream TV. But I always tell people, when you're making a joke, you got to make sure that not only are you laughing, but the people that you're telling to think it's somewhat kind of funny. If it's not, it's probably not the right joke. So it's interesting to see also how things progress and move forward, as far as how people and individuals approach different things. You can think always, like you said, with the George Floyd, the marches, obviously the stuff that just happened on January 6th. And then as we move forward over the next, I'm assuming 4 years, and, how can we move together, as a better unit as a nation? Because you would have liked to think with the timing of COVID, then with George Floyd, which I think we saw a lot of eyes really being opened, right?
Yeah, I think
I
think
think
the whole summer changed the game in a lot of ways for people, that they were willing to kind of explore conversations that they were very uncomfortable having.
Yeah, and they couldn't ignore it, right? Because nobody was working. You were at home. It was on it was on Nickelodeon. It was on everything, right? It was on social media. It just took over the air. It took over the airwaves. So there was no more of the excuses. Oh, I was working this week. I didn't see what happened. No, you were at home. You were actually might have been on lockdown where you couldn't do anything besides go to the grocery store or the doctor. So you got more eyes to it, and it came more of a reality. So I think that really helped. And then you had the summer, and it still kept going on. And then you seen some different stuff going, obviously different other instances that went on. So I just hope that we don't lose sight of what the true purpose is trying to build equality and unity, and not try to focus on, I guess I want to say this. I don't want people to try to focus on trying to chip away what the positive that we've made, and even though we're still in COVID, I'd also like to have thought, and then obviously with today, that it kind of hopefully it brought people together, right? Because look, if you ever can come together as a nation, right? You're fighting an unknown enemy. COVID has no barriers. You know what I'm saying?
It does not care who you are.
Doesn't care who you are.
Like what your race is, none of that.
Right. It will jack you up. It will affect you, and it will kill a lot of people. When it's ideally wasn't their time to go.
Right.
And so if you could ever rally around something and then take that and say, hey, look, if we can come to terms just on that, we can do some other stuff, right? And so I think it's going to take a lot of, and I think if the universities really do a good job, let's just look at the universities and sports teams, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have to eventually later on call out a former employer that has done right by me, but they've got to do better. If they really, really take this chance to really, really get in, pull up their sleeves and learn about each other and really, really get inclusive, right? You actually will make your company better. And I think sometimes universities are so scared. And I know there's the big donors out there that have a ton of money that for whatever they like it the way they like it. I get it. I'm a person of habit. You know what I mean? I'm OCD. I will do something 10 times until I get it right, until I can feel comfortable doing it. I like certain things, certain ways. And I understand that's out there. But really, at the end of the day, if they really get in there and do the good work and start to get people in there to be inclusive, get them in the decision-making process, it will help you grow your university 10 times, tenfold, and you'll be better for it. and you will still make as much money, and a lot of times even more money. And you won't have to fight against negative recruiting. You won't have the ugly perception out there. You will actually not be looked at as like in our, sometimes at the university look like as a bunch of hillbillies. And,
Right.
I mean, that's what Nebraska's looked at and outside the Midwest, a bunch of hillbillies and, not a lot of diversity, even though it's not necessarily true, but that's what you're thought of. But then at the same time, Nebraska wants to respect that the other universities that have been doing more on a diversity tip, you want that same respect. You can't do that. You have to really, really have to do the work. You really have to be willing to do the work. And it's not an overnight fix. You can't expect a dollar return on it. And you can't make it just some sort of like, I call it the UNICEF marketing type of deal, right? Let me just roll out a bunch of these stuff and see what we can do. Do it over time, because it will. You gotta be able to deal with the good with the bad, right? You can't say, oh, it didn't work out with Jay Foreman, so Greg Smith doesn't deserve an opportunity. Well, we only gave one of you guys an opportunity. Well, that's not how inclusiveness works, right? Because in the same token, I know there's been plenty other times that other people have gotten opportunities that hadn't worked out, but the same people that look like them have walked through the door and got numerous opportunities over and over and over, right? That's what you're talking about, fair, hiring practices and so forth and so on. So, it's just going to be, it's an interesting time. I think that, people should, take this time to learn about stuff and not just be so pigeonholed in their opinion. There is no right opinion out there. It's your opinion, and time usually tells, what happens, whether it's good or bad, and from a leadership standpoint also. So, but it's a good day. I will say this: I would never thought, if you would have asked me in 1998 when I was heading up to Buffalo, that in 2021 that you have two brothers on a podcast, in Nebraska talking, and there's other African Americans on the radio, I would probably said no, there'll probably be one, right? So,
Right.
You got to really think that there's been progress. It's hard. I don't want people to think, oh, I'm talking about we need more progress when this is a ton of progress, especially in Nebraska, right?
Right.
And people actually listening to your opinion and respecting your opinion. And also, you got to give, us and other guys that have done it, and the guys that came before, and the people that have helped them get other African Americans get started, right? They did the work. They did good work. We do good work. We're respectable to be on there. But we still need to keep pushing it and do more, because there's more out there to be had. We've all worked with people that when you got in your car, like where you're like, dang, that wasn't just about social media. That was a little bit of personal, right? And so we got to get past that and try to move forward for it. And I think the better work that we do, the more that we keep pushing the envelope, keep just being factual, not emotional. I think that'll help more than trying to, personally attack people, because once you attack people, I think that they get on the defensive, and then that'll kind of make them pigeonhole themselves even more.
Yeah, it's a fine line on the attack thing, and I feel like and it's really went a couple of things I want to mention quick on this is that one, it is a fine line on the attack thing, because you don't want people to just put their guards up. And I actually had over the summer with another Black guy the most kind of interesting conversation about that, as we were just kind of talking back and forth about the best way to kind of educate people and talk to them and open up dialogue. And he was very, very anti, don't call people names. Don't, you have to give people leeway. You got to give them this and that. And while I understand that, I also sometimes, and this is sometimes a flaw of mine, I have the tendency to just write people off or go after them if I feel like they're not really coming from a genuine place. I just feel like there's a fine line, because there's sometimes where, if, and we both, you and I have had to have had this experience because of where we live. I know people from a small town Nebraska, and this is no disrespect to small town Nebraska, that just weren't around any minorities of any kind, right? Not at all. So they may come from a place where they just don't understand different cultural things. That's different. And then they may or may not even understand where they may be messing something up or doing something wrong. That's a totally different situation than somebody who's like pelting you on social media, like denying that racism exists. Right? Like those are two different things. And I feel like you shouldn't always have to give person B in that scenario on social media the ropes, because they don't deserve that, in my opinion, at all times. That's a whole different subject. But what I do want to also hit on is, you mentioned something about kind of the dialogue and educating people. And I mentioned that a couple of times as well. And I feel like you do have to, I think, give some kudos to a lot of people that you know and don't know. We had a lot of conversations about this with other white folks about racism, the role of policing, like why people feel certain ways about, like why Black people feel certain ways about certain institutions, like all of that. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that are willing to be uncomfortable and try and learn and have those dialogues. It is just hard, right? I don't, and it's not like only because Sasha is on this with us and I'm not singling her out, but I understand where it would be hard for her to come to us and say, hey, why don't Black people in general seem to really trust police? Right? Like that would be hard for her to start that conversation. Like, and you have to also understand that as well, is that it's not always the easiest thing in the world for someone to start that conversation, but you do need to have some of those to be able to grow, because that's the only way you grow. That's the only way that you learn.
Yeah, it is. Those are hard conversations to have, and you know, it's always unique who starts it, right? But the best thing that you can do, my advice would be, is just to listen. And look, I got friends that work for the Lincoln Police Department that I love, and you know, I think 99% of the police officers out there are great, and they love to just want to be police officers, right? It's always that 1 or 2% that make everybody, you know, and it might be a little bit bigger now, but you know, that make everybody look bad, and they have to understand the fear, because ultimately, you know, I was listening to this show. It was actually Chris Rock, where he's saying that you take two people do the same crime, the same age, same person, and one's going to jail for 5 times more than the other person. That's why. That's not legitimately fair, right? That's not how the world. That's not at least how we've been told. At least
right. That's not how it's supposed to work, right?
That's not how this world's supposed to work, right? And I'm all for it. Like, look, I understand. I've been racially profiled here in Lincoln, and I've been racially profiled in Minnesota. I've been racially profiled when I lived in Texas. I've been pulled over. You know, one of my first instances ever being racially profiled was coming home from a basketball game in high school, driving home, dropped my best friend Jamal off, was driving home. I lived across the river, you know, from West Bloomington to Eden Prairie, going home. It was 11 o'clock at night. We were playing a city team, and, you know, you're just driving home, wasn't speeding or anything. And, you know, he flipped the cherries on me, followed me, and I had all my stuff. He pulled me over in my driveway, and luckily my dad came out, and, you know, he came out in his BVDs, tighty whities, and white beater hair all messed up, and went off on him because he knew the reason, because he tried to tell my dad that the car got stolen. Well, the car couldn't get stolen because he ran the plates, and he's like, I know you're at your house. Right. So at the end of the day, that was a life lesson for me that I had to learn at 16, 17 years old, whenever that was, right? But at the end of the day, I've been able to understand why, not like it and deal with it, but also understand, you know, when people say they truly fear it, I see it, and I understand why. I also understand that in different, growing up, you know, all my family from the DC area, and understanding in the way that the Baltimore police was known to how to operate in the city. One of my best friends, Keon Carpenter, that passed away a few years ago, you know, he was big into trying to help with police reform as far as, you know, getting the bad apples out of there. So I understand that. And so I always try to have an open mind to look at both sides, right? And then I have people that, when you talk about stuff, or whether it's you hear them talk about politics or anything like that, I always try to look at, like, okay, where did they work? Like, some people that were in the military, they think like their political views are based on one view, right? They want this. They want
right.
that.
It's a lot of single issues,
and that's
people out there. You know?
And so then, and there's nothing wrong with that because that's all they know, right? That's what they've been able to, make a living, retired or whatever. I got to understand that, and that's what they're so focused on, and that's their life experience, and so you have to be able to look at that. Or there's some people that like to view themselves as being an elitist, so they think that they need to do it that way, or they think that this is the only way that the world should or can work, or this is the way it's worked back in the 60s or 70s. That's just the way that they've been brought up. I've in-laws that are from small towns in Nebraska where you have to understand, look, they just haven't been around a lot of people that look like me, haven't obviously been associated with a lot of people that look like me, let alone be family members with not only me, but my side of the family. Right. So you got to make sure that you kind of always are on the education tip, but you're definitely right. The people that are just, hit the ignorant button, just because they just want to be ignorant or combative. I generally don't even listen to them or don't even respond to them, just because I can't even, if I'm not being ignorant, right? If I'm not being one-sided, but you want to be, we can't even have a conversation.
Right. There's no way that we're going to go there's nowhere that we're going to go in this conversation.
Right. Productive, because, at the end of the day, I'm not here trying to change your mind. If somebody's saying something, like, here's the funny thing about social media. Like, you could say something, right? Like, me and you could be talking, or me and Sasha could be, I don't know, tweeting, or I don't know, whatever you call it. We could be in a 3-person conversation. It could be somebody that takes the time out to follow us, jump in the conversation, and not want to be a part of a legitimate conversation, but somehow just want to influence their opinion on our social media platform, and then to get mad either if you don't respond or don't partake in their ignorance. That's the weirdest thing ever, right? You want to jump into a conversation that has nothing to do with you, that's not even in your wheelhouse, but then want to influence the conversation. So I always say that those are the type of people that like to have those conversations. I call it playing tennis, right? They want to play tennis with themselves, so then they never want to lose a point. They want to serve the ball, run across the net, volley it back, smash it, slice it back, and just keep going, and just want the score to be 0-0, and they're always winning. Those are people that just probably will be in the same place when they're, from the time that they're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, until the day that they pass, because they feel they just do not want to grow or to even see anything. And it's not even about changing. Seeing somebody else's perspective is not changing who you are. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
Understanding something, that the way people are built or raised, is not changing anything about you. It's just being a person. I mean, you get what I'm saying? Like you can always say, like, well, man, I wonder why they do that. Well, that's the way they're raised. Some people, like, I remember first time that, and this is something so stupid, but I remember when we were in rookie camp, and we had a rookie named Bobby Collins. We used to call him Bobby Boucher. He was from like North Alabama State, super fast and country. So they had like they'd made us like chicken and rice and broccoli, right? Well, Bobby ate the chicken bones, right? And look, and I'm looking at him like he got 3 heads. I'm looking
right now.
But he ate everything, right? He ate the whole chicken bone. He ate everything. So I didn't really say anything. And I remember talking to my best friend, Sean Bryce. I was like, man, do you see Bobby? And he was like, yeah, man. He's like, me and Peerless Price, right? He was like, we were talking about that on the way back to the week. We went out as rookies, and we went to, like, that was when they had all you could eat crab legs at Red Lobster, right? We went in there and just destroyed this place. So he had bought like a big Dungeness crab, and then he ate everything, the whole crab too. So fine, but the thing is that the point of the story is, finally I asked him, like, that Saturday we were hanging out, and he was just like, hey, look, that's just the way I was raised. That was just the way that I was taught. You eat everything, from the gristle to the bones to everything. You eat everything is good for you, right?
No,
so, right. Now, is that going to change the way that I'm going to go about eating my chicken and my crab legs? No, it didn't. Still hasn't. But it's something but what it taught me was, don't judge. Bobby's still a great dude, but I had to learn, like, hey, that's just the way he is. And so it's not directly correlated, but it's also just, you got to educate yourself. He was from the sticks of Alabama. That's all he knew. And he also he told me, he was like, look, we had to eat everything because we didn't know when our next big meal was coming from. So that was part of the filler up, everything. So, people should just take some time to, educate themselves, educate their kids, because it's, I will say this, and we can move on. Growing up now is going to be a little bit harder. This is probably one of the biggest things that I always worry about with my kids is the world is so crazy now. And so I would say explosive, right? So it's harder to grow up, right? So you got kids.
It's easier to get that stuff out there.
Right. And whether it's bullying or social media, it's a lot. It's a lot, right? So why not, as parents, make it easier on your kids to navigate through this life and become better people and have a better influence by educating them and maybe having them, because I remember my dad, I used to always say, do as I say, not as I do, and I want you to be better than me. And that's what you always want, right? And I want your life to be easier, right? Because I want you not to make the same mistake. So as a parent, why wouldn't you want them to make the same mistake that you knowingly make, right? Or that that your grandfathers make, or that your family make? It's wrong, right? A lot of people know we know when we do stuff that ain't right. And so you'd want to think that people would want their kids to be better educated, because listen here, once they get to our age, there's not going to be there. I hate to tell these people, it's not going to be, they're not going to be sitting at the boardrooms looking at the same type of people. I'm telling you. You get what I'm saying? It's the time is coming. You're going to have to be able to sit down, break bread, do business with people that do not look like you and are not from the same, zip code, area code, financial, backing from when they were kids. It's just going to be a different world. And so you want your kid to be as prepared as possible to be successful. And you got to educate them, because most of the education comes from at home. That's where the biggest influence comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it's interesting because this kind of goes, it relates, and I could go a long way around to relate this, but we do always go through to our favorite segments of the show. And the first one is called Coach Speak.
Coach Speak to Real Talk,
where we go through and we talk about something that somebody said, and then we kind of sell you the reel of what they actually said. And this week kind of comes courtesy of what I'm going to call the embattled James Harden, because my man has gone through it this season. A lot of this stuff, he brought it on himself. But because it's 2021 and we do these things on the gram now, he said this on Instagram. I think he might have deleted it. He said, we do all this talking about uplifting the next African-American athlete / male, and some of these ex-NBA players use national TV or their own social media to do just the opposite. I see it. I just stay to myself. The real never lose. Shout out to Dwayne Wade for being solid, because Dwayne Wade came out in support of James Harden after he got that trade to the New Jersey or the Brooklyn Nets. Boy, I'm old. The New Jersey Nets, the Brooklyn Nets, here over the last week. So, Jay, what did James really mean by that?
I think that he meant that he was just butthurt that Shaq and Charles Barkley called him to the table.
Yep.
About the amount of teammates that he's ran through and how he handled the situation, and the ignorance that he displayed by showing up out of shape. And they were right. Now, could they have handled it different? Maybe, but how are they supposed to handle it? They have a job to do that's tearing them down, because they actually don't hold any punches. Doesn't matter who it is.
Right.
And
it's not like they
singled
him out. He was the first one that they, took to task.
Right. Yeah. And, and they've done it with Kevin Durant. They've done it with LeBron. They've done it with every single issue. They've done it with owners. They've done it with white owners. They've done it with black owners, with, Michael Jordan not doing their job. So I saw it live. I didn't have a problem with it. I mean, he just said, look, you wanted Dwight Howard. You ran him. He wasn't good enough. You wanted Chris Paul. He wasn't good enough. You wanted Russell Westbrook. He wasn't good enough. Then all of a sudden Dan Antonio leaves, and all of a sudden now you want to just pick up shop after the whole organization, took a chance on you, which you don't owe them anything, because they took a chance on you and you developed into a superstar player, but they took a chance on you and made you into a superstar player. You got to remember,
they built the whole thing around him.
They built the whole thing around them, and they paid him as a top-tier player, as a sixth man from the Oklahoma City Thunder, and made him – he wasn't even the beard when he got there.
No,
And
he wasn't James Harden the way that he is now when he first got there, right?
Right, and they made it into a total isolation game. It was the James Harden show. And then all of a sudden, once Dan Antonio leaves, which, look, he was the franchise, and they didn't talk to him when they got rid of Morey and with the head coach. So I understand that. Then Russell Westbrook left. He didn't really, they were supposed to be boys, but then, it didn't work out, even though that they decent run in the bubble for them, and he didn't want to run it back. They still had good pieces, but they had a lot of injury concerns with, right now with Wall and Boogie Cousins getting healthy. And then all of a sudden he's never around, shows up to training camp out of shape, doesn't want to be there, and, forces a trade, and he gets called out. So what he wanted people to come to bat for him, but at the end of the day, why would they? Because not everybody in the NBA can do that.
Right, and he did a couple of things too also that weren't that were outside of the norm. So two things, and it feels like, because it's the time we live in, this always comes up, like COVID. The way that he handled that was terrible. The way, you can't be the face of the franchise, but you stay away from the team and you out here partying at the strip club, and then he was even then putting out cryptic stuff on Instagram talking about, I'm just going to do me, and they can't tell me what to do and that sort of thing. And then really, I think the thing that, the straw that broke the camel's back, I think for a lot of people, was when he went and did that press conference where he basically said the team sucked and they didn't have good players. It was the last press conference he ever did as a Houston Rocket, because basically everybody knew from that point, they had to get him out of there. Because remember, did you see the thing where they didn't have him come to practice that next day? And if you saw the press conference with Boogie Cousins, I think that they would threw some hands. I think that they were real mad, Cousins, John Wall, all of those guys, PJ Tucker, because I'm struggling to think of another situation where a guy that demanded a trade did a press conference after losing a game and basically said his team sucked. It's hard to even think of one like that. It was such a weird situation. So I understand why people are not exactly fans of James Harden to begin with, and with all of this stuff. And you throw in that people just generally don't like stars pushing for trades. It never really goes that well for anybody. You talk about Kawhi and how that went for him in San Antonio, Anthony Davis and how it went for him with the Pelicans. Everybody kind of goes through it, but nobody has done, at least in my immediate knowledge memory, has done the combination of stuff that James Harden did. And that's why he's catching his heat from former players, media people, current players. Everybody is here lining up to get their shots on James Harden.
Yeah, and he didn't handle it right, and what he could have just said, I want to be traded. You need to trade me, and there's different ways. There's an unwritten rule in sports. You never dog your teammates. You never disrespect your teammates. There's been plenty of guys that wanted to be traded, and look at Anthony Davis. He had to put on the good soldier's hat and finish out a season. Because
if there was anybody that could have came out and said, my teammates suck and I'm good, it could have been him. They didn't have he had Drew Holiday, and that was it.
Yeah, and he was in a new and bootleg organization down there. Until now they have, I think, good guys with David Griffin and stuff. So you got to think. So, and also you got to think a lot of these media guys, this is what people don't understand. They have more intel than what they're even saying on TV, right? And they also know what it's like to be in those locker rooms. And yes, it's a little bit tricky because of the Shaq and Kobe and how toxic that was, but they still went out there and tried to win championships and did win championships. Right. Ultimately, Kobe ran Shaq out of L.A. But at the end of the day, they didn't dog their teammates. They went out there and did what they had to do. And look, these are NBA all-star type of players. John Wall, come back healthy, is an NBA all-star player.
Right.
Boogie Cousins, Chris Wood, Tucker. And here's the thing that I couldn't do. The guys that are all sacrificed for the betterment of James Harden, I'm thinking of Gordon, and I'm thinking of PJ Tucker, right? That have all kind of catered to him. I could never get in there and say, look, we're just crappy right now. These are the same dudes.
That's a great point, because those dudes like PJ Tucker essentially became a guy that stands in the corner and shoots threes so that they could play the way that James Harden wants to play. And then for him to turn around and say these guys suck, would make you a little mad.
Right. And then also you got to think James Harden was on the team with CP3 when they had the Warriors down, and James Harden in every big game has not been able to come through, right? Even in the MVP, he has not been able to have that performance when it's money time, right, in the playoffs. But then the best thing that you want to do is go join, the second best player in the NBA and another top 10 player in the NBA and have it easy and go out there to the Brooklyn Nets and run through people and get a championship that way. So there's a lot of moving parts to it, but the way he's handled it, it wasn't the best. And now to make it even worse, even though, James Harden, and I will say this about James Harden because I still have a lot of connections in Houston and go down quite frequently. He was great in the community and did a lot of great things, let alone, I think, either today or tomorrow or within the next week, his steakhouse down there opens.
Yeah, I saw that.
So it'll be interesting to see how that happens. I think as time passed, I think he'll realize that he could have done things better. But it's a unique situation, and I don't know how long that steakhouse will last. Considering that the owner is a huge restaurant guy and obviously with hotels and stuff like that, he was going to make James into. Eventually, could have probably bought into the Rockets, in my opinion. So when you make these decisions, you can't make them hastily, and I think also when you have that much control and that much influence on the Rockets, they eventually would have got you some players because everybody loves to come. Houston's a great sports town, so you could get players to come and play with you. You got to learn how to play, and yes, Brooklyn is, in my opinion, the odds-on favorite should win. And if he doesn't win it now, dude, you're just going to be you're going to be a guy that's going to end up being on 10, 11, 12, 13 teams, and you're going to mess around being like the modern day Adrian Dantley, that is running around trying to score points and trying to just get on the back end of a championship.
Yeah, and it's crazy too because all of that being said, like he is such a good individual player, just a brilliant individual player, and he went out in this first game for Brooklyn against the Orlando Magic on Saturday and put up a 30-point triple-double. Just walked in and put up 32 points, 14 assists, 12 rebounds, and 4 steals, by the way, and helped them to a win. Now, what's interesting, though, is that, you saw those highlights all over the place, but, man, they only beat the Magic by 7 points. It's going to be so interesting to see how that Nets team does. And obviously Kyrie didn't play in that game. But, boy, you look at that bench. And it's just not very good. Like they don't have much size on the team, and they don't have many. Like they have very few like just lockdown defenders. Like they to me are going to be in the playoffs. Their matchups are going to determine so much because it's going to be a thing where if they run into a team that is a bad matchup for them, they could really struggle. And obviously a lot of people, and us being Lakers fans, probably view this as we're heading towards a Lakers-Nets final, which will be fun. Like think about all the storylines that you could end up having there. But as we've learned with James Harden teams before, like he can put up these 30-point triple-doubles. He can do all of this. The 40-point streak from a year or two ago. All of that stuff he can run up and down the court doing in the regular season. He is the ultimate guy of we got to see it in the playoffs before people really believe it.
Yeah, he's got a long road to go, but I think he's making it a little bit easier when you got Kevin Durant.
That guy makes it a lot easier for you, and that's even before you get to Kyrie, because Kevin Durant, and that's the other thing. Like it's been like, and I like Kevin Durant, like, and I'm with you. I think he is the second best player in the league, and I feel like because he was out with the injury, people kind of forgot him a little bit, and then he gets back out here and he just putting 40 pieces on people left and right, and you're like, oh yeah, that guy's really good at basketball. Like that guy's a killer. And we'll get it done in the clutch too. So maybe that'll help. But one way or the other, like everybody's going to be watching to see how it plays out for them.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see and how it moves forward. And if there's another big trade, maybe try to combat that. Because, look, everybody's on red alert. And that first game put people in red alert. Heck, you even got Kyrie out of, out of hiding that he wants to all of a sudden come back and play now. So, it motivated a lot of people. To do better. and everybody's on notice, but it's not going to be easy. These are NBA players, and they all know that there's weaknesses out there, and anybody can be beat. So it's been done before, but it's definitely brought some spiciness to this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, speaking of spicy, one other thing I want to make sure we get to, and I know it's funny, we just staying in your wheelhouse of cities here because we go keep it in Houston.
Let's break that down.
Hey, what are they gonna do with Deshaun Watson? They're gonna have to get Deshaun Watson out of here. And and he's upset with the Texans organization for a number of reasons. And where I kind of want to start with this is we saw something on Twitter. I have the date here, January 12th, so a few days ago, that we just never see. We saw Andre Johnson, Texans legend, Texans great, come out and tweet something about the Deshaun Watson Houston Texans situation. This is what he said. He said, "If I'm Deshaun Watson, I will stand my ground. The Texans organization is known for wasting players' careers. Since Jack Easterby has walked into the building, nothing good has happened in or for the organization, and for some reason, someone can't seem to see what's going on. Pathetic," with exclamation points.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know what it's crazy because I'm taken aback still reading this because you just don't hear from Andre Johnson. Like the last time before that he even tweeted was December 6th, and it was an ad. The time before that was December 1st, like then November 15th. Like he just doesn't, like he's not a guy who, I say that to say, he's not a guy who's just out here talking willy-nilly, right? He's just not out here putting his thoughts out about everything. So I guess we start here. Like when you first even saw that Dre put that statement out, like were you also taken aback by even seeing him make a statement?
Yeah, it was crazy because, a lot of the former guys still talk to Dre, and we were just texting. It was like, dang, Andre spoke. And I'm telling you, look, I subtweeted or whatever you call it, quote tweeted. I swear, it seems like he only said like 20 words when he was there. Like if you get up next to him and you're riding over practice, he'll talk to you, then you joke, but he's very, very direct and to the point, right? He's very, very introverted, and he has his circle of guys. But he's one of the greatest teammates and one of the greatest dudes ever, right?
Yep.
But he doesn't say much, and because he's just about balling. That's it. And then also when he says stuff, it's like E.F. Hutton. Everybody is listening. And for the fact that and Andre's worked in the organization though, right? And he's a very, very fair-minded person, very, very smart, very, very quiet, really good learner, right? You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
So when he says something like that, you like, whoa, and it gives it instant credibility, right? Because he sees things. And Andre's probably seen a lot and hadn't said anything. And just by the number of tweets and stuff like that, he don't even. I mean, he'll get it. He does his charity work about his kids. Maybe he's like, he didn't even really wanted to do when he got his number retired. Wouldn't say he was uncomfortable, but it wasn't his wheelhouse, right? So he's in there with the owners. He's one of the guys, man. He is Mr. Texan. Him and J.J. Watt and now Deshaun Watson. Those are the guys. Right, he's done everything you need to. A Hall of Fame player, the best player in Texans history, with no off the field issues. And when he says something like that, it brings a magnifying glass to some of the things that have been going on and plaguing the Houston Texans organization for years. And then, let alone when you have one divisive guy, that's made it even worse. It's something, and when you have one guy that's been very divisive for years, and then has made it worse, and nothing's been done. And then you see in me and Andre and the guys that have been there that were there from the beginning. Andre took the organization to a whole new level. J.J. Watt took it to the maximum, or actually, obviously, hopefully get a little bit higher with the World Championship. It built it up, and seeing where it started, where it's at. You got one guy internally beating it down or breaking it down, and nothing's being done. And then you got Deshaun Watson with no offensive line help. Somehow another Hall of Fame receiver in his prime gets traded for a bag of peanuts, a bootleg running back, and a second-round pick that's going to end up probably being somebody they end up trading or cutting anyways.
Right.
And Andre's been there. And he said the quote, look, the Texans have wasted a lot of careers. And he's not just talking about his own. there's tons of talent that was there that got wasted. So, and as you get older and you get wiser and you see things, you understand the business side of it. And he probably doesn't want to see Deshaun Watson to go through some of the things that he had to go through or some other players had to go through, because it's not fun. And especially when you have every opportunity to win and it's an easy decision to do. You got to get franchise quarterback, one of the guys that's going to be in the MVP conversation for years to come. And all he's wanting to know is that if you're going to try to do better and interview some minority coaches, that your search firm that you paid, I'm assuming hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
Right.
That you used and requested, and that they advised you to, interview some guy like Louis Riddick, who should be an NFL GM, right? He's all over. One of the smartest and well-respected guys out there. Should be an NFL GM. Didn't interview him, and then you didn't even bring in Eric Bieniemy, until, let me just give you a token. So, there's things going on there it's alarming, and it's something that the Houston Texans better get under control, because I can tell you what, Deshaun Watson is definitely looking and trying to get his best opportunity to win. And very rarely in the NFL, I will say this, do you see a player that's able to dictate the terms of a trade without acting like Antonio Brown or, say, James Harden. You have a top-notch, well-respected, on and off the field, up and coming. If things go the way they're going, I'm assuming Hall of Fame type of player, great track record, exceeded expectations, X, Y, and Z, that has all the control because he has no trade clause and he could just sit out and then you have to trade him. This is a very, very unique time, not only in the NFL, but for Deshaun Watson, let alone, I'll take it on a step further, you haven't seen many African Americans having this opportunity in the NFL to do it without acting their way out of it. He could just sit back, still do what he needs to do, and act like everything's kosher and just go in there and say, look, I want to be traded. We are done here. And nobody would fault him for it. They can't say he's a bad kid. Can't say he doesn't work hard. Say he didn't produce. He's a great teammate. He's been a good soldier. He's been there through some times that, we've seen the articles coming out about the Texans, and then he kept on keeping on with less around him and kept playing better. Coach being fired in the middle of the season, the quasi GM being fired in the middle of the season, Romeo Crennel being the head coach, new offensive coordinator, and still one of the top passers and producers in the NFL. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. This is if the time for him is now, because I foresee that team being blown up, and maybe it's the best thing for him, best thing for it to have some sort of happy mutual parting, no bad feelings, and maybe come back and have a swan song at the end of his career and finish up that way. Don't waste your years getting beat up because, he's had some knee injuries and injury histories, and getting beat up as a quarterback at this time in his career is probably not the best thing for him.
Yeah, they're going to have to. That's I think to me, the real interesting thing, because you don't see situations like this in the NFL. But the Texans as an organization are at a weird crossroads where they're talking about having to move J.J. Watt. If they're going to have to do that, they probably need to just move Deshaun Watson and try to just blow the organization up and start over. Problem is that you're trying to get a coach and you're like, hey, coach, I know you'd want to actually coach this guy, but we might have to go ahead and tear this thing down. And so it's going to cloud that as well about who you can get, because you're going to have to explain to somebody that, hey, you got a long leash here because we know that we're about to have to blow this thing up. Like, it's just a weird situation. And then they've done this. The Texans have done this to themselves in so many ways. But it's a crazy situation for them. And obviously there are many, many teams out there that are going to be wanting to get into the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, and we'll see kind of where that goes. But I think they should move him. For his sake, I hope they move him so that he can get to a better situation. Maybe the Bears could do the right thing and get involved. I'm just saying, after they messed up to begin with, he could just be on the team. But that's neither here nor there, right?
Well, they would have to trade. The Bears could, if they were smart, say, look, we'll send you Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles.
Right, I'll send you both quarterbacks, the first round pick, and start spacing out other first round picks.
Right.
Because we're talking about a young franchise quarterback that has there's no hey, maybe he can be good in a year or two. No, he's great now. We know it. So you would be willing to give up a little bit, even more on top of that for him, and just give up, whatever you got to get him. Listen, man, I would throw in a franchise to Giordano's or something if I had to get Texans some pizza if we got to do a thing. Because that would be to see what that trade would end up being. We've seen these trades in the NBA where you like the James Harden trade, like the Anthony Davis trade, and you get these 4 pick swaps in the future and all of that. I'd get creative on how we want to go ahead and get this down and make sure the Texans get whatever they need so we can get that guy.
Yeah, because they need the Texans need picks. Bill O'Brien had traded the whole gamut for Laremy Tunsil. So yeah, you got to get creative. You got to give them a deal that they got to really understand it, where they can sell it to people. This is a trade that we couldn't say no to. And then it's got to be a destination to where Deshaun, wants to go and has a chance to win. So there's few out there, but there's moving parts. You got Carson Wentz that needs to be dealt with. Yeah, Chicago doesn't have a quarterback. Do you want to go to Chicago, which would be great for him, for Deshaun? But you got a lame duck GM and a lame duck coach. Now Deshaun comes in there and he wins 10 games. They go to the playoffs and win the NFC North. Then they both get extensions. So I think that Deshaun's going to be there regardless. So, but at the end of the day, he needs to go to a stable organization with a stable winning culture that's going to set him up for not only to win next year, but the next 3 or 4 years. Because his window of domination is 4 or 5 years, to where he's going to be neck and neck with Mahomes. I envision Kansas City is going to slow down just because of salary cap ramifications.
Yeah, eventually that's going to have to happen.
Eventually that's going to have to be blown up. Then he's going to have to be set up for the time to really pounce and be healthy enough with the, coach and everything, for them to be successful. So it's going to be interesting to see. I'm sure he's got people in his ear, and he seems like a pretty smart guy. He's got Andre, in his back pocket, and that's probably one of the smartest guys to have. Because Andre is going to come and give him advice, not only from experience, but for looking out for him, which needs to be done first. In the NFL, these guys need to learn. This isn't the NBA. You can't average 4 points and 6 rebounds and get, $10 million a year.
Right.
They will get you up out of there real quick. And unless you were Josh Gordon, you would keep getting multiple chances, and he would be 43 years old, still have 3 years of credibility in the league. But it's so forth and so on. So, get your money, get your chances, try to win as much rings as you can, and when you got control, you gotta use it.
Absolutely. Now, listen, we're gonna end this show the same way we end them all, with our favorite segment called "Put Them on Blast."
Put them on blast.
So we basically put somebody on blast for something they did or said. I'm just gonna go ahead and keep us hit the Houston trifecta. I'm gonna go back to the Rockets and actually put the GM of the Houston Rockets, Raphael Stone, who's in his first year. So I kind of feel bad for him. What a heck of a time to come in, him and Coach Silas coming in, but to have this land in your lap. But something that always bothers me about these superstar trades is draft assets. We were talking about this in the NFL. I think it's different because Texans don't actually have picks. That's a different situation. But in the NBA, there seems to be this weird, almost like people really go over the top about teams getting draft assets. We saw this with the Pelicans and the picks that they got. And then we see it again with this Rockets deal. And the reason why I say this one is actually worse, and I'm putting Raphael Stone on blast, is if they had the opportunity to get Ben Simmons in the deal instead of trading James Harden to the Nets. And I guess maybe I should say we're putting Raphael Stone and Tillman Fertitta on blast, the owner of the Rockets, because reportedly Fertitta did not want to trade James Harden to the 76ers no matter what. because that's where Daryl Morey, the former GM of Houston, is, and they didn't want him to get his ultimate way of then trading for his star after they went ahead and fired him, right? But I'm trying to figure out what's the value of getting these pick swaps and unprotected picks from the Nets in 2022 and 2024 when they will still be good, if those picks are going to be at the end of the draft, when instead of having those picks, you could have had an actual star player in Ben Simmons. Like, sometimes you got to put ego to the side and just take the best actual deal that you can get and help your team. Like, how much better would you feel about the Rockets' ability to move forward and build if they were building around Simmons versus Oladipo, who wants to leave anyway, and these, unprotected picks and pick swaps in the future? So I think the Houston Rockets, once again, we're going to stay in Houston, go ahead with the H-Town trifecta, and put Rafael Stone and Tillman Fertitta on blast for what I feel is not taking the best deal that they could have absolutely gotten for James Harden and being petty pats about not trading him to the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah, you're definitely correct. You never mix emotion when you're dealing with business, and that was exactly. And Tim, the owner, should know better than that. He's a successful billionaire. He should know better than that. And Daryl Morey probably cost him a lot of money with the whole thing over with the NBA China. But at the end of the day, you got to do it the best thing for it, because you got to view that you're getting a superstar player in Ben Simmons that would have liked to probably most likely been in Houston, versus I call him a rent to own, with probably no ownership opportunity with Victor Oladipo. So then you're going to be back to square one with a bunch of late first round picks. None of those guys are guaranteed to make it anyways. And there's not a lot of trade value when you're trying to make another deal in the future. So a lot of it is, depending on, how good the team does. So yeah, they got outwitted by not only James Harden, but Daryl Morey. Because, the Philadelphia 76ers got to keep their team, and they're pretty salty, and they got a good coach. So they were playing with house money. So the Houston Rockets, yes, they moved James Harden, but they got, I would say at the end of the day, the short end of the stick, unless something works out with Victor Oladipo, and they
get lucky with those picks. They have to. It has.
Or yeah, they got to get extremely lucky with those picks. And guys got to continue to play well. John Wall's got to stay healthy. Cousins got to stay healthy. And those picks have got to turn in. That one of those picks has to turn into an NBA future All-Star player.
Right. Those picks are great until they turn into like Jackson Hayes, like the Pelicans, right? Like it's just those picks sound great in theory until the picks become names.
Yeah. So it's it's one of those things that they got to deal with and see what happens. So, now for me, I was going to put the Texans on blast. We spent a ton of time with that, but I'm going to put the Philadelphia Eagles brass on blast. Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman on how they handled Doug Peterson. And I'm just going to get right to it. Everybody saw the last game of the season. Doug Peterson pulled Jalen Hurts, put in a guy that he said they deserved to play, that been on the practice squad and been a good soldier. In a game that they could have possibly kept the Redskins out of the playoffs, pretty much gave up. The assumption was he was told by ownership to do that so they could keep the 6th pick. And if they won, they would have the 9th pick. So essentially the coach would be coming back. Ultimately, a few days later, Doug Peterson still had a scorned relationship with Carson Wentz. The owner chose Carson Wentz over a Super Bowl winning coach who they just have put a statue outside of their big, nice $1 billion stadium just 2 years ago, and fired the coach and decided to put all in on Carson Wentz, which I'm putting them on blast, which as an organization that's been so good for so long in Philly, even back when, say, from Andy Reid all the way up until now, consistently in the playoffs and winning, you should know better that you don't get rid of a good coach in Doug Peterson, Super Bowl winning coach, for a player that has not lived up to expectations, regardless of the stupid contract that you gave him, because you can always find a way to move the player and the contract and hit reset with quarterback, especially if you have a quarterback that hasn't won anything in the playoffs and had a horrible year this year. Now you're going to go out there and now you're not as desirable, because now you have unrest at the quarterback position, let alone the coaching fraternity is very, very tight. So they know that Doug Peterson, to their admission, didn't deserve to get fired, got fired. So why would I come and coach here with a quarterback that's not good? Our second-round quarterback, it provided a better spark, but we kind of shoved him to the side by putting a third-string guy in there. And our number one supposedly quarterback, one of the worst contracts in the NFL that's costing us a ton of money against the cap, doesn't want to compete, and he wants to dictate everything without producing on the field. So, and also, these GM that I would be working with, Howie Rose, drafted horribly, right? So it's going to be really, really interesting to see, how they move forward. But I'm definitely put on blast, not only for their firing practices, their personnel practices, and ultimately their hiring practices, because they haven't been able to get a good coach unless they've, made a decision here at 10 o'clock, which is highly unlikely because they are spinning their wheels on trying to get somebody to come in and be the head coach of the Philadelphia Football Eagles.
Yeah, it's gonna be a mess. And seeing that whole thing play, it's funny. It was just a couple weeks ago. We just said when they threw that game, didn't we say that their offseason was going to be really fascinating to watch unfold because that could go any number of ways. Now we probably didn't think it was going to go the way of him getting fired. But we did think it was going to be odd for them moving forward, and it definitely is starting off that way for the offseason.
Yeah, it's just one of those things in the NFL that these guys. It's like these coaches get here. These coaches get hired. Look, one thing I learned about coaching: you get hired to get fired, and it's as quick as you win a Super Bowl, you become the dummy to right next, right? Like all of a sudden, Bill Belichick doesn't, he's not a good coach anymore. He's he's probably the greatest football coach in the NFL of all time, right?
Right.
All of a sudden, you lose the greatest quarterback of all time. Now you're just an average coach. No, he's still a good coach. He doesn't have all the players that he needs. And here's what people don't understand. What makes great coaches is great assistant coaches. What makes great coaching staffs are great players. What makes great leaders are people that want to be led. That's it. You just don't there's not anybody going out there. It's like you don't see Alabama winning with a bunch of guys that should be playing at Division III, San Jose, Sacramento State. You have great players. You get what I'm saying? You have first round picks out there. You got it, but yes, you got to develop them, and that's part of it. That's also in the NFL. You got to develop players. You got to draft right. So when you can draft Justin Jefferson and you don't have any receivers, you draft Justin Jefferson because he was one of the most unstoppable receivers in college football. You don't take the receiver from TCU, right? Those are the mistakes that you make. That's how your organization doesn't continue to progress, and then they regress, and then you have a blow up situation to where when they almost made the playoffs last year, and now you could fire a coach in a matter of a few months later, a Super Bowl winning coach. Now he's out, going to be an offensive coordinator for a year. End up probably being a head coach somewhere in a year or two, but ultimately he could still be in Philly trying to figure it out. So sometimes the decision makers aren't the smartest guys in the room, and ultimately the guys that make the teams that make the most decisions the right way and do it over and over and over are generally have the guys that aren't the smartest guys in the room. They have everybody around them that have their expertise and they lean on them. And that's how you see teams continue to draft well, continue to recover after a so-so or a down season. And you see them winning year in and year out. And ultimately Philly is not moving into that direction right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll kind of be able to keep track of what's happening out there. It's going to be wild. NFL offseason is always wild, but that's going to do it for us today. Subscribe to the podcast everywhere you can listen to them. Rate us, review us, leave us a 5-star review. If you only leave 4, I am inclined to think you're a hater and you don't want that. Make sure that you're checking out the other podcasts on the Hail Varsity Network, the Mind Your Own podcast, Varsity Club, More to It, and the Hail Varsity Radio Show. You can also subscribe to the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Check that out. We also have an email address that you can send us love notes to at straightupbreakdown@hailvarsity.com. And you can find us on Twitter at Greg Smith HB and at Foreman5644. We will catch you next time.
A Hurrdat Media Production.